Now in our 26th year, a quarter of a century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all-amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1365 with a release and air date of Saturday, April 26, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the cue tone.
Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations across the country, and podcast on the internet since 1993. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1365 of This Week in Amateur Radio. The International Amateur Radio Union, after celebrating its 100th anniversary, puts its eyes on restructuring the organization. Ham Radio 2025, the International Amateur Radio Hamfest, is coming up in Friedrichshafen, Germany. The HamConB 2025 Hamfest, it's a big one, and that's coming up in Belgium. A judge halts the shutdown of the Voice of America and orders it back on the air. AMSAT is looking for volunteers to help with satellite engineering drawings. The ARRL announces exhibits and forums at the upcoming 2025 Hamvention in Xenia, Ohio. AMSAT is soliciting volunteers to help man their presentations at the upcoming Hamvention. The recent ARRL Ham Radio Open House events find success and a lot of media coverage. Amateur radio helps out at the recently concluded Boston Marathon. We'll tell you how. The Armed Forces Day crossband tests are coming up and they're scheduled for Saturday, May 10th. The World Radio Sport Team Championships deadline for registration is April 30th. Hams in South Africa are fostering growth in the Sub-Sahara region. And efforts are underway to save the Marconi radio towers in Canada. We will tell you all about it coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DL, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all of those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Onno Benschop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will tell us how to become mode agile. Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, with a century of amateur radio, will take us aboard the Wayback Machine to January 1922, as amateur signals successfully crossed the Atlantic, despite the broadcast community saying it couldn't be done. This week's episode is entitled Crossing 3, The Accolades. And we will stop by and visit with Bill Sawyers, HA8B in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DX, expeditions, DX in general, upcoming radio sport contests, and a lot more. That's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from our headquarters in the rainy and chilly suburbs surrounding Albany, New York, and reporting directly today from our Studio B, which hasn't been used in quite a while, I'm George W2XBS, blowing the dust off of all the gear.
And reporting from our news bureau this week in Cortlandville, New York, where hopefully the April showers will bring May flowers, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau here on the Space Coast of Florida, I'm Ed, W2PH.
Reporting from our news bureau in Lebanon, Tennessee, where the temperature will be in the 80s again next week, I'm Al Shephard, WK8W.
And reporting from our True New York News Bureau, where the purples of Motherwort are just starting to bloom, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our ham radio outpost in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where the song of the lawnmower is being heard throughout the neighborhood, I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
And reporting from our news bureau in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where spring has definitely sprung, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR.
Leading off our news this week, the International Amateur Radio Union, which has just marked the 100th anniversary of its founding in Paris, is using the occasion to look within and to consider a way it can be restructured. The IARU's Administrative Council has released a consultation containing an overview and a number of proposals. Region 2, which covers North, Central, and South America, will be hosting 2 informal meetings on the Zoom platform where Region 2 societies can discuss the document, ask questions, or recommend changes. One Zoom session will be conducted in Spanish on Monday, May 5th, 2025 at 2359 UTC, moderated by Ramon Santoya, XE1KK, former Region 2 president. And then current Region 2 President George Gorsline, VE3YV, will moderate a session on Wednesday, May 7th, in English at 2359 UTC.
You are invited to experience the fascinating world of amateur radio in Friedrichshafen, Germany on Lake Constance from June 27th to the 29th, 2025. Europe's most important trade fair for radio amateurs, entitled Ham Radio, will be held for the 48th time. The weekend of June 27th will be devoted to the usual in-person contacts between old friends, with plenty of workshops, seminars, and new product displays in the mix of activities. The motto for this year's exhibition in Germany, however, is all about not being there. The theme of remote radio, connecting the world, focuses on how radio operators are no longer required to be in the same places or equipment in order to transmit successfully. This kind of remote operation has already been demonstrated in a number of high-profile de-expeditions using RIBs, or a radio in a box. These stations are controlled remotely over the internet, opening up more opportunities for those who wish to experiment and allowing the expeditions to take place in environmentally sensitive areas where human presence is forbidden or restricted. Last year's event on Lake Constance attracted more than 11,300 attendees from 58 nations. You can immerse yourself in a world full of unlimited possibilities and discover the latest trends and technologies in amateur radio. In addition, our partner and conceptual sponsor for the trade fair this year is the German Amateur Radio Club, and it is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. Messe Friedrichshafen would like to congratulate them on 3/4 of a century of full commitment to amateur radio. Remote stations are of critical importance to the DARC as they not only extend the range and accessibility of amateur radio, but also provide a platform for sharing knowledge, driving forward technical innovations, and ensuring reliable communications in a time of crisis. Last year, the DARC set up Project Remote, which is currently entering the nationwide test phase with an online portal. The official launch will take place at Ham Radio 2025, where visitors can get a first impression of the participating stations and find out more about the future of the DARC project. Book your online ticket now for Ham Radio 2025 today at its special price and join in the celebrations. Meanwhile, going over to Belgium, the HamCon-B Amateur Radio Conference will take place in Belgium on April 26, 2025. That's coming up shortly. Attendees can expect programming to focus on radio technology in space, and workshops. The HamCon-B 2025 conference is Belgium's premier forum for engineers, scientists, radio amateurs, researchers, and students to exchange ideas on advancements in radio technology and beyond. Admission to the conference is free, but registration is mandatory. Presentation topics include Mesh-tastic, beacons, radio sport, tracking Asian hornets with SDR, and a whole lot more. We'll see you at HamCon-B 2025 in Belgium.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The Trump administration's efforts to shut down the Voice of America broadcast network were handed a setback this week when a federal court judge ordered the administration to restore the service. The shutdown of the United States Agency for Global Media was ordered as part of the administration's DOGE cuts and was termed illegal by the VOA at the time it was ordered. The executive order to reduce the performance of their statutory functions and associated personnel to minimum presence and function required by law resulted in more than 1,000 employees being placed on leave and the termination of 600 contracts. Since that executive order, VOA offices in Washington have been padlocked, its employees put on paid leave but cut off from their work emails, and contractors terminated. It was the first time broadcasts from the 83-year-old institution, which was founded in 1942, were halted since it was founded during World War II to combat propaganda from the Nazi regime. U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth issued a preliminary injunction ordering that the administration take all necessary steps to reinstate employees and contractors, as well as to restore funding to Radio Free Asia and Middle East Broadcasting Network. Lamberth, who is presiding over a half-dozen lawsuits filed by employees and contractors, is also requiring the broadcasters to file monthly status reports to confirm that USAGM is complying with his orders. Late last month, U.S. District Judge J. Paul Oitken issued a temporary restraining order against the Trump administration for taking any further action to shutter the Voice of America.
As the AMSAT engineering team prepares to build an engineering prototype of its Golf 3U CubeSat with deployable solar panels, its mechanical engineers could use a bit of help creating drawings for the satellite solar panels, antennas, and associated small parts. You will work directly with the engineer who created the parts. When asked to make a drawing, the engineer will provide you with the AutoCAD inventor file of the part, plus the assembly model where the part is used. From the assembly model, you can learn the function of the assembly and the role of the part in the assembly. This information will help you determine how to dimension the part and choose tolerances so that it is machined properly. Also, the engineer will provide written instructions for guidance and be available to answer questions. If you have some spare time to create about 20 drawings, each consisting of a latch, spring, bushing, structural post, antenna mount, PCBs, etc., AMSAT engineers could use your help to stay on schedule. The time estimate that a drawing might require is 1 to 3 hours of time. Their modeling software is AutoCAD Inventor. They can provide access to an Inventor license if you need it. For more information, please send your email with a short description of your experience to volunteer@amsat.org.
ARRL welcomes members and all radio amateurs to visit us at the 2025 Dayton Hamvention, being held May 16th through the 18th in Xenia, Ohio. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here to tell us more in this report from League headquarters.
The event features 3 days of fun activities, ham radio programming, and plenty of opportunities to engage with ARRL. Saturday's ARRL Youth Rally will be a fun day of ham radio discovery and friendship for young people aged 11 to 21. Among the teams leading the youth rally will be volunteers from the ARRL Collegiate Amateur Radio Program, CARP, who are also exhibiting and presenting at Hamvention. In addition to the CARP Forum, ARRL has many other exciting forums planned at Hamvention. Start off Friday with a surf-side lesson on portable antennas with Salty Walt Hudson, K4OGO, of the popular Coastal Waves and Wires YouTube channel. Salty Walt's Forum is Friday 10:15 a.m. until 11:15 a.m. in Room 3. The ARRL Membership Forum is on Saturday, and there are many other great ARRL forums for you to attend, and you can see the whole list at www.arrl.org/expo. You can also visit ARRL's large exhibit area in the Tesla building. All great things that you expect from ARRL will be there, including the chance to get some ARRL merchandise and publications. Get your free 2025 ARRL button. The ARRL VEC will be on site to help hams renew their license, and you can visit with ARRL leaders face-to-face and learn about how to get involved in your local ham community and much more. You asked and we listened. The ever-popular on-site radio emissions testing by the ARRL lab returns this year. Have your handheld tested to make sure the output is clean. Expert engineers will be on hand to do it right in front of you. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
You can also see the ARRL Sweepstakes ICOM Dream Station on display. You can find ticket information at www.hamvention.org. Download the ARRL Program Guide PDF, which includes a map of the ARRL exhibit area. We look forward to seeing you in Dayton.
The 2025 Dayton Hamvention will be held at Greene County Fairgrounds in Xenia, Ohio on May 16th through the 18th, 2025. AMSAT will have our usual robust presence and after-hours activities. AMSAT is one of the largest exhibitors at Hamvention, occupying booths 1007 through 1010 and 1107 through 1110 in Building 1. AMSAT is actively seeking volunteers to assist with booth activities and invites enthusiasts to dedicate their time. Last year, around 20 volunteers played crucial roles in fostering meaningful interactions with attendees. Volunteers, whether able to commit a few hours or the entire weekend, are warmly encouraged to participate. For those eager to be part of AMSAT's presence at Dayton Hamvention or request more information about volunteering, contact Phil Smith, Whiskey 1 Echo Mike Echo, AMSAT Hamvention team leader. To volunteer or inquire further, individuals can reach out to Phil via email at Whiskey1 Echo Mike Echo at astrocom.net. Your involvement not only enriches the event, but also contributes to the vibrant amateur radio community.
The 16th Annual Tucson Amateur Packet Radio and AMSAT Banquet will be held at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center on Friday, May 16th at 18:30 Eastern Daylight Time. This dinner is always a highlight of the Tapper and AMSAT activities during the Dayton Hamvention. This year's banquet speaker will be Phil Karn, Kilo Alpha 9, Quebec, who will highlight developments and use cases for his Kilo Alpha 9 Quebec radio software suite. The Kohler Presidential Banquet Center is located at 4548 Presidential Way, Kettering, Ohio, about 20 minutes away from the Greene County Fairgrounds. Tickets may be purchased from the AMSAT store online. The banquet ticket purchase deadline is Monday, May 12th at 1700 Eastern Daylight Time or 2100 UTC. Banquet tickets must be purchased in advance and will not be sold at the AMSAT booth. There will be no tickets to pick up at the AMSAT booth. Tickets purchased online will be maintained on a list with check-in at the door at the banquet center. Seating is limited to the number of meals reserved with the Kohler caterers based on the number of tickets sold by the deadline.
The 76th International DX Convention was held in Visalia, California from April 11th through the 13th. With all the details on the conference, we go to our field reporter, John Ross, KD8IDJ, with this report.
A major focus of this year's conference was the future of DXpeditions. A full day of informative presentations was focused on the next generation DXing program. ARRL was there to engage with members and document the sessions on video. The first of many next-gen DX presentations is available now on the ARRL HQ YouTube channel. The playlist will be built out in the coming days with the rest of the material. Even if you never plan to go on a DXpedition, the information in these sessions will give you a deep dive insight into what goes on into making one of these far-flung activities and activations happen. The panelists hope that some may even be inspired to enter the world of operating from rare entities. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Session 1 focuses on mission planning. The forum is moderated by noted DXer Ned Stearns, AA7A, who also serves as ARRL Vice Director for the Southwestern Division. The panel also includes George Wallner, AA7JV, Don Greenbaum, N1DG, and ARRL Radio Sport and Regulatory Affairs Manager, Bart Jank, W9JJ. Each of the four experts share their perspective on the current state of DXpeditions and what evolving technology and regulatory situations mean for the future.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
If you are a high school student or even younger, the easiest way to attend this year's Hamvention is to simply show up on Saturday, May 17th at the Greene County Fair and Expo Center. Admission is free that day for youngsters. Young visitors who want an experience that's designed just for them are also able to attend the Youth Rally, a special day-long program designed to offer students a variety of hands-on experiences in amateur radio. It is led by Steve Goodgame, Kilo 5, Alpha Tango Alpha, the ARRL's Education and Learning Manager. Students get to take part in a short on-air sprint, contact the parachute mobile radio operator, and learn about satellite communications. Youngsters are encouraged to bring a 2-meter handheld if they have one. Unlike admission to the fairgrounds, advanced registration is recommended for the Youth Rally and costs $20.
For years, the K-12 education team at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory worked to get students to see themselves. Now teachers lament how to fill the gap. The team made hundreds of lesson plans around major space events. They facilitated workshops for teachers, created a high school internship, took meteor rocks to local campuses, and much, much more. All of these activities were meant to foster the next generation of STEM professionals. In 2018, JPL's K-12 education team was part of a group that won an Emmy for its coverage of the Cassini mission's grand finale at Saturn. But during the last round of layoffs at JPL, the tiny team was among the 325 let go. And though some parts of the educational program remain, educators across the country mourn what was lost. The program was for teachers, by teachers. 3 of the K-12 education team's 4 members are former classroom teachers. That experience helped them know what to do and what not to do to make their materials useful. We wanted to make sure that teachers didn't have to figure out how to get our stuff in, said Oda Lutz, former manager for STEM elementary and secondary education and a former math teacher. The education team served as a pipeline, taking the missions, discoveries, and engineering innovations that happened at JPL and turning them into resources for teachers. The team's efforts proved fruitful. The JPL Education website drove about 30% of the research center's annual web traffic, to the tune of about a little over 2 million visits annually, Lutz said.
ARRL ham radio open house events across North America have increased public awareness and engagement with amateur radio during April, which is also Citizen Science Month. John Ross, KD8IDJ, is here with the rest of the story.
Centered around World Amateur Radio Day on April 18th, ARRL ham radio open house events were held in at least 57 locations. Several more are scheduled for this upcoming weekend. In Vienna, West Virginia, the Parkersburg Amateur Radio Club, W8PAR, set up its open house in a shopping mall, garnering many impressions in foot traffic and even more in the local news. The Marietta Times newspaper and WTAP-TV both did stories on their activation. In Yaphank, New York, on Long Island, an event held by the Suffolk County Radio Club was featured in Newsday. Reporter Joe Workmeister profiled the club's event that drew out a crowd of visitors. ARRL Hudson Division Director Ed Wilson, W2XDD, who serves as vice president of the club, was quoted in that story. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, W5DX, says the media exposure is invaluable. News coverage, especially once the stories are shared on social media, multiplies the message in ways we couldn't even begin to. The ARRL's media monitoring tool tells us that 1.32 million people were reached with the coverage from Long Island alone. All that media placement was earned by ARRL volunteers telling the story of ham radio, she said. Many of the clubs which participated have told ARRL they intend to make the open houses a yearly event. Harrop hopes the clubs can build on the momentum of that success. ARRL Ham Radio Open House was a great introduction for people to what radio amateurs do. Let's keep those new folks engaged in the clubs, make them feel welcome in the community, then get them licensed and have them take part in 2025 ARRL Field Day. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
Clubs that participated in ARRL Ham Radio Open House will be asked to submit visitor counts to show how many people were reached in person. HamSci and SciStarter, which worked with ARRL to develop and promote the event, are working to track the encounters as part of 1 Million Acts of Science, SciStarter's nationwide program for Citizen Science Month.
Over 280 amateur radio operators volunteered during the 129th running of the Boston Marathon on April 21. Operators were working virtually at every location connected with the race, including the starting line, the entire course, the finish line, transportation, and various operations centers, including the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency, the State Emergency Operations Center, Unified Command Center, and the BAA Race Operations Center in Boston. Combined, they performed communications duties that included logistics support as a primary function and backup support for medical and other public safety requests for the race as needed. This is one of the largest public service events Radio Amateur supports in the United States, and planning started over 6 months in advance, said Rob Macedo, KD1CY, of the Boston Athletic Association Communications Committee.
Applicants for the summer 2025 sessions of the ARRL Teachers Institute on Wireless Technology must apply by April 30th to be considered. With all the information you need to join the 2025 Teachers Institute, we go to League headquarters where John Ross, KD8I-DJ, files this report.
The application process is straightforward. Interested educators can find the web form at www.arrl.org/TI. ARRL covers all of the costs of the TI, including travel, but there is a $100 application fee if the teacher is accepted. The Teachers Institutes are a productive week for those who attend. The program is designed to not just introduce amateur radio to classrooms, but more importantly, to enable teachers to build content around wireless technology of all kinds into their lessons. Part of ARRL's mission is to inspire the next generation of radio amateurs, but through this program, the ripple effects spread into all things radio engineering. ARRL Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, said teachers leave fired up about radio. To see the excitement these educators have after a TI is very rewarding. We see success that enthusiasm ripples out across the communities, and we want to reach more teachers than ever before, said Goodgame. ARRL has expanded the program for 2025, doing sessions around the country. The Teachers Institute is funded entirely by donations to the ARRL Technology and Education Fund. Over the winter, ham radio YouTubers and donors raised $41,000 for the program in a telethon. I'm John Ross, KD8I-DJ.
The first field session of the Teachers Institute was held on Staten Island in New York City. Other regions are planned for 2025. Staten Island Technical High School students talked about the program in the January 2025 QST Digital Edition. We rely on the community to support this program, and donors have seen the success and wanted to be part of it. They have enabled the growth and expansion of the Teachers Institute, and now we hope to get more applicants who want to come participate in this amazing professional development opportunity, said Goodgame.
A reminder that the annual Armed Forces Day crossband test hosted by the Department of Defense is scheduled for Saturday, May 10th, 2025. The event will test two-way communications between military stations and amateur radio operators, as authorized by the Federal Communications Commission Title 47 of the Code of Federal Regulations 47 CFR 97.111. The test provides opportunities and challenges for operators to test their individual technical skills in a controlled scenario that will not impact public or private communications. The annual Department of Defense message will be transmitted via RTTY on 14.667 kHz at 1400 and 2000 UTC. Military stations will transmit on selected military frequencies and announce the specific amateur radio service frequencies that will be monitored. All scheduled times will be in UTC, and all scheduled transmissions will be upper sideband unless otherwise noted. Frequencies, times, and other technical information can be found at DoD Mars Armed Forces Day. Those who wish to document their contacts with a QSL card should visit www.usarmymars.org and complete the request form. For more than 50 years, military and amateur stations have taken part in this event.
You're listening to America's premier amateur radio news magazine of the air. This Week in Amateur Radio.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX. As part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJ8B. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes, so you won't have to take notes about URLs or dates, times, and call signs. Let's start with a press release from the Northern California DX Foundation, the NCDXF, and this was dated 16 April. In April 2021, the NCDXF announced the creation of the NCDXF D-Excellence Award to be given to the outstanding D-Expedition of the previous 12 months. This award is intended to recognize excellence in a D-Expedition that received funding from NCDXF, as exemplified by its practices, ethics, management, transparency, impact upon the DXing community, and lastly, exhibited fun. The winner of the award is determined by the NCDXF Board of Directors. The board considered several factors, including performance, complexity of the D-Expedition, the impact on Club Log's most wanted rankings, among others. Especially important are activities associated with supporting local humanitarian and educational needs. At our annual Board of Directors meeting at the IDXC in Visalia last weekend, we voted on this year's award and decided that the two D-Expeditions each deserved one. The following presentations were made. Number 1, the N5J Jarvis D-Expedition received the NCDXF D-Excellence Award at the IDXC Banquet for their successful 100% rig-in-a-box or rib operation on Jarvis Island. The 3 Delta II Yankee Rotuma Youth D-Expedition received the NCDXF D-Excellence Award at the IDXC DX Forum. Their support of youth with a host of youth remote operators was very impressive. The NCDXF looks forward to D-Expeditions this year that may qualify for the next award to be given in 2026. We are hopeful that many D-Expeditions will be funded by NCDXF and will qualify for this award. As a side note, the mission of the NCDXF is to provide necessary financial support for well-organized D-Expeditions to desirable DXCC entities and to support advances in D-Expeditioning skills, technology, and infrastructure. Those funds come from the contribution of our supporters in the DX community. Your contributions will help make DX happen. If you'd like more information, you can check out their website, which is ncdxf.org. And this was respectfully submitted by Craig Thompson, K9CT, NCDXF Vice President. So congratulations to both N5J and 3 Delta II Yankee for well-deserved recognition. If you've been with me the past several weeks, you know that I am trying to focus on those entities that will be available in the next week. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next 7 days might be helpful. Here's what should be on in the coming week. This information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com. LA0CW, Oyston, is back in Papua New Guinea and his QRV is P29CW. He has a rotational schedule of 4 weeks on duty followed by 4 weeks off. So you may not catch him for a while, but when he's active, he'll be real active. So good luck with that. P29 is a great catch. Look for JE1HXZ Mitsu to be operating as JD1 PBG from Ogasawara Islands from now till May 5th. He will be running 50 watts into a vertical, dipole, and loop for activity on 160 through 6 meters. Mitsu will be on CW, sideband, RIDI, FT8, and FT4. QSL via LOTW or direct to JE1HXZ. DL2SBY, Casimir, with his 5 Hotel 1 Kilo Bravo call sign, vacations at a large hotel in Tanzania until May 1st, and we'll get on the air with some time. Plus, we'll look for a good QTH for a 2026 visit. Emphasizing 6 meters, he's hoping for a room on the north side of the hotel. He hopes for a wide balcony and good conditions. Next year, he hopes he can rent a house and set up larger antennas and spend more time there. Remo, HB9 SHD, is doing a 4-wheel drive trip to June 15th and says, quote, "My time on the air will be limited. From Windhoek, Namibia, driving south and turning north along the coast to Estotia and finally ending up in Botswana. His call sign will be V51-HB9 SHD, and he'll have a Yaesu FT891, 40 through 6 meters, sideband and digital, with a Highfeld JPC-12 antenna. He does not plan any paper QSLs, but will confirm QSOs on LOTW. And this, my friends, is the big DX news of the week. After multiple attempts since 2018 to obtain permits to visit Marion Island and operate from there, Eurus, Whale 2 GM, has finally received permission. He is currently on board the ship MVSA Agaltha, which departed from Cape Town, South Africa, heading towards Marion Island. Eurus will operate from Marion Island at ZS Zulu Sierra 8 Whiskey between April 25th and May 16th. ZS8 is ranked number 11 on Club Log's DXCC Most Wanted list. Eurus will be on Marion Island as a radio engineer and member of the SANAP Station Communication Equipment Maintenance Team and stay there for the period during this year's annual supply replenishment and exchange of overwinning personnel at the station. He may be active on all modes from 160 to 6 meters. Equipment will include 2 FT891s and 1 SPE Expert linear amplifier. Eurus will be using an 18-meter high vertical with a capacity hat for 160, 80, 40, and 3 meters, along with beverages for receive on the low bands. Additionally, a spider beam will be used on 20 through 10 meters, a DX Commander vertical for 40 through 10 meters, and a 5-element Yagi on 6 meters. Split operation will always be used. Yari will listen on CW up 1 or more, and on 160 he will listen down 2 for Japan. On sideband, he'll be listening up 5 or more. Eurus is a great operator, and if you can get this in the log, this is a 1 every 20 or 25 year event. So this is worth taking a day off. So I hope you get them. And if you do, let me know. F5RAV has the C5LT call sign, and YT3PL has the C5R call sign for operations from the Gambia. They are QRV now until May 2nd. They will use CW sideband and FT8, FT4 on on HF 6 meters and satellite. QSL C5LT direct to F5RAV and C5R via YU5R. Logs will be uploaded to Club Log. And I should pause at this point and tell you, I'm really struggling with allergies tonight. So if it doesn't sound the same quality, I apologize for that in advance. We have an update from the Galapagos Islands. HD8G has had internet issues, so they decided to update Club Log just once a day. Leaderboards and live streams may be discontinued. They operated from 2 different sites during their second day, 4 stations. 2 of them were on 24 hours a day, HF and 6. A third had problems, and a fourth is only doing satellites with the op PV8DX. And when all 4 are on the air, the voltage drops significantly, affecting all of them. On this 4th day, we have already drawn some conclusions about what works and what doesn't, what can be improved and what can't be improved. Unfortunately, the internet problem is beyond our reach, and we can't solve it. We can only look at the glass half full and be thankful that we can still send our ADIF logs twice a day to Club Log. I hope this can motivate those who consult the leaderboard on a regular basis. These are the things these guys run into that we just don't think about, and we take for granted they're going to be there and they're going to work us and crank it out. But boy, it's really a challenge, I'll tell you. Finally, today we managed to set up the inverted L antenna for 160 meters and the sloper antennas for 60 meters. We couldn't have had a better surprise. On the first night with these antennas, we had many contacts on 60 meters and FT8, and the first contacts on 160 meters, especially with North America. We hope to increase our contacts in the coming days on the lower bands, especially 60 meters, 80 meters, and 160, considering the number of operators who ask us to operate on those bands. A team led by multiple Croatian hams will be active from Tuvalu Island in the Austral Island chain from April 25th through May 7th. They have booked their flights and accommodations and received the special call sign Tango X-Ray 9 Alpha, which has been accredited by the ARL DXCC desk. Their de-expedition goals include using human modes as much as possible, operating 2 transmitters at the same time, monitoring the 50 megahertz band, and utilizing various antennas for different bands. Internet and electricity should be stable. QSL cards can be requested via DK8ZZ through ClubLog OQRS or directly to DK8ZZ's address. As I've been saying, if you haven't worked these guys, you haven't turned on your rig. Here's an update from the VP2VI guys in the Virgin Islands. After 14 days, they've had 148,400 QSOs with 32,900 unique call signs, and they have 3.5 days to go. Propagation was better today. Not yet the same as in the beginning, but we were able to produce some good rates on the high bands at peak times. There was a decent 6-meter opening between North America and South America today, but we were sitting in the middle, so it didn't really benefit us. Local weather has improved too, and the waves are down to normal bathtub waves, end quote. Yesterday, we met Walker, K5ARP, who lives on the island. He has a drone and made a few still pictures of us from the air. If I can find some time, I will work on them and provide it to you via the web. It will be our last try in this area to reach VK-ZL on 160. With 1,400 plus CW contacts in the log on 160, it seems we have given a fair chance to all 160-meter enthusiasts. In the coming days, we will use the 160-meter radio setup on different bands after 0600 Zulu when Europe is in full daylight. The most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Alex, K6VHF, was the guest. Alex talked about everything from the world records that he holds to his work with SETI, his Deep Space Exploration Society work, his DX and de-expeditioning activities, as well as his participation in the bouncing signals off of Venus activities. You should give it a listen. He's a real Renaissance guy. You can always check out the DX Mentor Facebook page to keep tabs on what is current and what is coming. I know that the ARL contest sheet is available elsewhere, and the contests that I mentioned are sometimes redundant with that. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in the log that they may otherwise not get. The next contest that I will be participating in is the 1010 Spring DX Contest on the weekend of May 3rd and May 4th. The exchange is your 1010 number, if you have one, name, and call sign. If you don't have one, it's 0. This is a fun way to rack up QSOs on 10 meters and potentially work some new DX and fill band slots. And don't forget, for a good 4 or 5 years, 10 meters isn't even available to us due to sunspots. So if you can work it now and take it while it's hot. Please send me an email if you need any details of this or anything we've talked about previously. And by the way, my 1010 number is 24008 from back in the 70s. Until next week, this is Bill, AJ8B, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-wife Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-ups. Have a great DX week.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 36th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio, Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for giving us permission to use his website in the production of these segments. Now sit back and enjoy this chapter of Ham Radio History. Crossings 3, Accolades. Back in London, Philip Corsi, the British test coordinator, kidded Paul Godley about freezing up north in soggy Scotland while he and the other British hams relaxed comfortably in their warm, cozy London homes, receiving signals using small aerials. British amateurs had indeed heard many northeast U.S. stations, and one BCG was also heard in Holland and on a ship docked in Hamburg. Godley spent 10 hours at Corsi's office documenting details of the test. January's QST banner cover headline read, "Transatlantic Tests Succeed," followed by a list of 20 CW and 6 Spark stations whose signals had made it across during Godley's adventures in Arderson. Inside, the lead article did not yet have all the details but proclaimed, "Transatlantic Tests Successful," and "We got across." "Excelsior," crowed ARRL Secretary Warner in his editorial as he recounted the skepticism with which an attempt at amateur transatlantic communications was met by professional communications engineers, and how certain that they had been that amateurs could not possibly succeed. The feat rocked the radio community. Warner continued, "They had no idea it could be done. Strong and steady signals night after night at a distance of 3,000 miles with an input of less than a kilowatt and the wavelength 200 meters. They're wondering today why they put in 200 kilowatt machines and miles of 500-foot towers and use wavelengths of many thousands of meters when a private citizen in his home in Podunk, Pennsylvania, with less than 50 watts of CW power, can do the same thing. He struck a nerve. In response, Bowen, Washington, chief engineer at Independent Wireless Telegraph Company, took exception in a letter to QST. The commercial engineers, he said, were wondering no such thing and had taken aim at a different goal entirely. They spent more for higher power and big antennas to achieve reliable around-the-clock service. However, many still suspected the original 200-meter assignment was meant to do away with amateurs. Now that they had shown what could be done, the worry might shift to others coveting what was once considered worthless. The identity of one of the successful transmitting stations continued to puzzle everyone. Exactly who 1AAW was, heard on Spark that first night, identified on the January cover only as illegal station, not yet located, remained a mystery. Some had reported hearing the call sign locally in the Boston area, though the Roxbury, Massachusetts ham who actually held the call hadn't been on the air in over 6 months. In a long article, the New York Times reported the entire story of the test, including the planning, procedures, and participation, and wrongly credited the actual owner of 1AAW with the first signal received. A new era in the history of amateur wireless work will date from this achievement, the paper noted, emphasizing that low-powered instruments had surprisingly done the work of large high-power commercial stations, probably annoying Mr. Washington and his colleagues yet again. A second, smaller article in the same edition quoted Maxim, who remarked, "It had not been thought possible by experts that amateurs could span the ocean, and we have proved that it could be done," adding that the amateur's apparatus has been developed on the basis of love for his work. It is not the perfunctory, although skillful, performance of the hired employee. The article's headline, "Maxim is pleased with radio tests," indicates that he was well enough known to deserve a single-name reference in the Times. Paul Godley's successful operation was a kind of combined contest and de-expedition. It took place outdoors in December during downpours, winds, and cold temperatures, operating on batteries from a tent heated by an oil stove and lit by an oil lantern. Winds and rain from a passing cyclone thrashed the location. "What a debt we owe Godley for what he went through for us," wrote Warner. If there were still any doubts about the effectiveness of CW over Spark, the transatlantics swept them aside. The transmitting station made famous by the test was the high brain-powered, as much as RF-powered, 1BCG. Having marveled at its consistently strong and steady signals, which were far better than any of the rest, Godley and Pearson had wondered what kind of transmitter and antenna the station was using. Constructed especially for the transatlantic test, it was described at length, first by George E. Burghard at the RCA meeting at Columbia on 20 December 1921, as Godley was on his return voyage, and reprinted in QST the following February. Because the identities of the qualifying transmitting stations had been kept secret, and since this new station was yet to be built when Godley left New York, he and Pearson had no way of knowing anything about it other than who the call sign belonged to. As Godley sailed for England, 6 RCA members, Armstrong, Amy, Burghard, Cronkite, Grunin, and Inman, met on 18 November and decided to build a new station specifically to reach Godley. After considering several sites, they chose Cronkite's station, 1BCG, in Greenwich, Connecticut, and began construction the next day. Working day and night, in snow and rain, they managed to finish the antenna and its extensive ground system on 30 November and attempted their first transmissions late that night with expectedly poor results, they reported. Supported by 2 masts, 108 and 75 feet tall and 230 feet apart, the transmitting antenna was a T-vertical in which all 3 sections of the T were wire cages. It had a counterpoise radial system fanning out from the base of the feed line. There was no earth-ground connection. The station being positioned at the center of it all permitted a very short lead-in connection to the transmitter. Antenna-resistant measurements indicated that it was resonant near 190 meters. They were intending to work at 230 meters, which partly explained the poor first attempt. A great deal of thought went into building a transmitter that would work optimally with the superheterodyne receiver Godley would be using. They wanted to be sure the frequency was stable so that he could make use of natural resonances of the headphones and his ears. Everything about the design was to be optimized right down to the human element in the receiving system. Designing for a 1 kilohertz audio note in the receiver, they wanted as constant a radio frequency as possible in order to eliminate changes in audio that would be distracting to the receiving operator or worse, make the signal inaudible. They would push the capabilities of the state-of-the-art in 1921, but with people like Edwin Armstrong on the design team, they were defining the state-of-the-art. There is but one type of transmitter which can possibly meet this condition, the master oscillator amplifier type, with a motor generator for the plate supply, they concluded, referring to a two-stage transmitter with a DC plate voltage produced by an AC motor driving a DC generator instead of either a battery or a straight AC supply. The transmitter would have a UV204 radiotron tube for the oscillator and 3 more in parallel for the final amplifier with 2200 DC volts on their plates. The oscillator would run continuously to avoid frequency variations introduced by keying it on and off, and the transmitter was keyed by 2 relays. One opened the grid leak circuit, disabling the amplifier stage, and the other shifted the wavelength of the oscillator by 5 meters, about 38 kilohertz, in effect FSK, where the vac wave or backlash component during key-up times was at greatly reduced power. The relays were referred to as mechanically controlled keys. The output circuit was coupled to the antenna through a fairly standard 2-winding air transformer arrangement.
A quick break for identification purposes. You're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
Methodically dealing with one problem after another over the course of several days, they finally had the new transmitter up and running just past 1 o'clock in the morning on 9 December, which explains why Godley did not hear them at all on the first night, despite conditions being so good. They measured their antenna power at 558 watts, with 990 watts input power to the tubes. By far the most important innovation in this transmitter was the steadiness of its transmitted frequency, which did not vary under keying or with the movement of the antenna, both of which affected most other CW stations of the time. Observation on a windy night, when the notes of all CW stations heard were varying so badly as to be almost unreadable, showed the frequency of 1 BCG to be absolutely unaffected by the motion of the antenna, they noted. Interestingly, it was difficult for the team to get accurate reports from listeners about the steadiness and quality of their signal because 1 BCG signal was so strong that it would cause nearby receivers within 50 miles to shift frequency, having unstable oscillators themselves and lacking any sort of automatic gain control. Instead, they were able to fashion a local signal monitor that would develop a beat note using the third harmonic of the detector oscillator against the station's primary signal. Several records were set by the station during the test, including distances of 3,800 miles to Amsterdam, 2,600 miles to California, and in message passing, a 12-word one to Godley in Ardrossan and 3 to Catalina Island, California. Nearly coincidental with the transatlantic tests from 14 December to 5 January, Clifford J. Dow, 6 ZAC, at Wailuka Territory of Hawaii, had been receiving many mainland amateur stations, mostly special license stations, including a couple in the Midwest and an Army station, XF-1 at Langley Field in Virginia. Despite heavy QRN and harmonic QRM from NPM at Pearl Harbor, he also managed to copy message traffic directed to him blind by several West Coast stations. Dow had thus achieved something the transatlantics had not, the relaying of a routine message for a third party as part of normal ARRL relaying operations. On the coast, 6ZR's 1 kW spark on 375 meters in Los Angeles was the loudest arriving in Hawaii, beating even KPH, the RCA station in San Francisco, and 6ZAF, who was running 100 watts on CW, was in all over the house on 2 steps, wrote Dow, referring to a detector with 1 or 2 steps of audio amplification, making it audible far away from the headphones. Dow intended to build a set just like the one at 6ZAF to attempt a two-way contact. In Europe, as reported by Corsi in the Wireless World, British amateurs had successfully received code groups from the scheduled stations and copied many other free-for-all stations. One BCG was heard by 5 different British amateurs. W.R. Byrne of Sale, Cheshire, heard 7 stations and won the top British prizes. Corsi defended British amateurs against charges of inferior equipment being the reason for the failed earlier tests and lack of receptions prior to the December test. He attributed the success to the increased length of the tests, noting that the previous ones had been run for only 3 days, and this time the major opening had only lasted that long. He also blamed it for the time zone differences and that British hams do not routinely stay up late, thus reinforcing their non-boiled owl credentials. Furthermore, all the pre-war equipment in Britain had been confiscated by the government and, when returned, was mostly unfit for use, so they had to build from scratch after the war. Lastly, Godley was allowed to use a much longer antenna than is normally permitted for British amateurs. Interest had also been high in France, where there had been some amusing confusion over Godley's messages sent by a MUU, which they copied every morning. He often used phonetic words instead of letters whenever he wanted to make sure a call sign or code group made it through, especially after the MGES mix-up. So when he said he had heard one able yacht, the French took it to mean he heard a boat at sea. Dr. Pierre Carreau, editor of the French amateur magazine La TSF Moderne, wrote about their confusion. "Here's a puzzle for us," a correspondent writes us. "I'll be damned if I understand anything of this mystery where rams, dogs, foxes, yachts, and even X-rays play such an important part. Might this not be a code?" He proceeded to explain how phonetics could be used as code for letter groups the way the telephone girls do it, he wrote. Once they figured out the system, they had no further problem with Godley's messages. But there were other words that caused confusion, such as beverage and sync gap, which required explanation too. French amateurs were being licensed for 100 watts of CW and 200 meters, partly resulting from the successful tests. Carreau went on to speculate about propagation effects, astonished that the short wavelengths do carry after all. Their scientists were at a loss to explain it, but suggested it might be due to reflection from the higher strata of the atmosphere. Could it have been related to the moon? Based on which days signals were and were not heard, perhaps moonlight had an effect, since it was not well known that short waves are particularly sensitive to the absorbing effects of light. The full moon was on 15 December, and Godley had heard nothing but feeble signals from the 12th onward. A sidebar to Godley's article reported that F. Clifford Esty, 1AVF, had in January succeeded in passing 3 messages to W.W. Burnham in London, who acknowledged them by cable. An early supporter of the test and prize sponsor, Burnham had heard of the American plan to send Godley over to listen. After reading how only the American hams were dyed in the wool and could stay up all hours listening, he had embraced and upped Warner's challenge and bet ARRL a new spring hat that Godley would not hear any American signals at all, never mind it becoming commonplace. July QSD showed the ARRL secretary wearing his prize. The hat, which was made by Harrods, is hand-painted in colors, bearing on one side the Union Jack and on the other side the Stars and Stripes, united by wireless flashes which encircle the crown. Inside the hat is the inscription from W. Whit Burnham, M.I.R.E., to Kenneth B. Warner, Secretary, ARRL, while on the front in hand-painted lettering is, in commemoration of the success of the Anglo-American wireless test organized by the ARRL, 1921. It looks rather like some versions of the lid worn by the Mad Hatter in Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Included in this material are quotes from the following: K.B. Warner, Excelsior, Editorial, QST, January 1922, page 25. Ray R. January Editorial, Radio Communications by the Amateurs, QST, April 1922, page 63. Amateur Radio's Triumph, The New York Times, December 18, 1921. Maximus Pleased with Radio Tests, The New York Times, December 18, 1921. The Editor, The Story of the Transatlantics, QST, February 1922, page 7. G. A. Burghard, Station 1 BCG, QST, February 1922, page 29. And now, Trans-Pacifics, QST, March 1922, page 7. The European Transatlantic Results, QST, March 1922, page 20. Philip R. Kersey, Report on Receptions by British Amateurs in the Transatlantic Tests, December 1921, QST, May 1922, page 23. More about the Transatlantics, QST, April 1922, page 35. An Echo of the Transatlantic Tests, International Amateur Radio, QST, July 1922, page 35. With a tip of the TWIAR cap to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for allowing us to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, to prepare this chapter, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Over the years, I've talked about different ways of using our license to transmit. I've discussed things like modes, such as voice, AM, FM, and SSB, and digital modes like FT8, Whisper, RTTY, FreeDV, Hellschreiber, Olivia, and even Morse code. Recently, it occurred to me that there is something odd about how we do this as a community. Now that I've realized this, it's hard to unsee. Let me see if I can get you to the same place of wonder. Why is it that we as amateurs only use one such mode at a time? Let me say that again. With all the modes we have available to us, why do we only use one mode at a time? Why do we get our brain into the mindset of one activity, stop doing that in order to move to another mode? It's weird. Amateur radio is what's called frequency agile. What I mean by that is we are not restricted to a fixed number of channels like most, if not all, other radio users. We can set our transmission frequency to whatever we want, within the restrictions imposed by our license conditions, and start making noise. There's agreement on what mode you can use where, but within that comes a great deal of flexibility. We have the ability to find each other, call CQ, and if the band is open and your station is transmitting a signal, the chance is good that someone somewhere on planet Earth will respond. We change frequency at will, almost without thought. But why don't we do this with modes? The closest I've seen is local VHF and UHF contests, where you get different points depending on which mode you're using, and even that seems hard fought. It's weird. We have an increasing range of software-defined radios, or SDR, where your voice or incoming text can be transformed to a different mode at the touch of a button, but we rarely, if ever, use this ability. In case you're thinking that the restriction relates to the availability of SDR in the average amateur Radio Shack, most amateur modes fit within a normal audio stream, and that same flexibility could be applied to the vast majority of transmitters scattered around the globe. But to my knowledge, it isn't. Why is that? Better still, what can we do about it? Can we develop procedures and processes to make us more, let's call it, mode agile, giving us the ability to change mode at the same ease as we change frequency? What would a mode and frequency agile amateur look like? What processes would you use? Right now, the best we have is to QSY, or announce that we're changing frequency, but I've never heard anyone use that to describe a change of mode. Of course, it's possible that I've led a sheltered life and not been on air enough, but if that's the case, I'd love to hear about it. So what is stopping us from becoming even more flexible? Do we need to practice this, develop better tools, teach new amateurs, have multi-mode nets, invent new modes that share information across different modes simultaneously, build radios that can transmit on different frequencies, or something else? I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Hamvention is right around the corner. While you're perusing all the neat stuff at the ARRL booths, take a wander over to the AMSAT area. You can find them in booths 1007 through 1010 and across the aisle in 1107 through 1110. Meet with some of the AMSAT engineering team, ask questions, see some of the neat projects we are working on. If you happen to be in the area on Thursday evening, AMSAT has an informal dinner at Tickets from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. No program, no speaker, just a lot of satellite guys and gals that want to get together for a bite to eat. Then on Friday evening, there's the annual Taper AMSAT Banquet at the Kohler Presidential Banquet Center. The food is always excellent. You can get tickets for this at the AMSAT online store. The deadline is May 12th. This year, the speaker will be Phil Kern, KA9Q, who will talk about his KA9Q radio software suite. On Saturday, be sure to attend the AMSAT Forum in Forum Room 2 from 1:35 p.m. until 3:10 p.m. The AMSAT Forum will immediately follow the ARIS Forum, so there's no need to change rooms. The ARIS Forum begins at 12:40 p.m. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
And thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time once again for this week's propagation forecast and weekly solar weather report. Solar activity has been at low levels with only minor C-class flaring through April 24, 2025, and is expected to be moderate with a chance of M-class flares, which are minor to moderate levels through April 26. No Earth-directed coronal mass ejections have been observed. A southwest CME was observed on April 23 and is considered to be far side due to the lack of any on-disk plasma motion and flare activity. Solar wind parameters continued to be slightly enhanced due to the coronal hole high-speed streams associated with the positive polarity coronal holes in the southern hemisphere. Solar wind parameters are expected to continue to be influenced by positive polarity, with coronal hole high-speed streams conditions through April 26. Nominal conditions are expected thereafter. On April 25, SpaceWeather.com reported the Earth was struck by an interplanetary shockwave on April 24 around 0700 UTC. An interplanetary shockwave is an abrupt change in the solar wind, probably caused by the coronal mass ejection. Overall, solar activity remained at low levels. Region AR 4064 remained the largest sunspot group on the disk. The region's intermediate spots grew in penumbral area over the past 24 hours. The geomagnetic field is expected to remain at mostly quiet to unsettled levels, with active conditions likely on April 27 due to the influence from multiple positive polarity coronal hole high-speed streams. There are currently 11 numbered sunspot regions on the solar disk. Solar activity is expected to be low with a chance for M-class flares on April 26 and 27. The 10.7 cm solar flux will be 165 on April 26 and 27, and 170 on April 28th through the 30th. The predicted sunspot numbers will be 159 on April 26th and 167 on April 27th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the vocap online for ham radio website.
Just ahead in Radio Sport, a lot of great contests this upcoming week. April 26th to the 27th, there are 5 contests. The 1010 International Spring Contest, that's digital. The SPDX Ready Contest, also digital. The UKEIDX Contest, that's CW. And April 26th to the 27th, the Florida QSO Party, that's CW and phone. On April 28th, it's the RSGB FT4 contest, that's digital. April 30th to May 1st, the 432 MHz Spring Sprint, CW phone and digital. April 30th as well, the UKEICC 80-meter contest, that's CW and digital. May 1st, the NRAU 10-meter activity contest, CW phone and digital. May 3rd through the 4th, a lot more contests. The 1010 International Spring Contest, CW. The Microwave Spring Contest, CW phone and digital. The ARI International DX Contest, CW phone and RIDI. The 7th Call Area QSO Party, CW phone and digital. The Indiana QSO Party, CW phone. The Delaware QSO Party, CW phone and digital. And on May 3rd through the 4th, it's the New England QSO Party, CW phone and digital. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, April 25th through the 27th. It's the Big Bear Ham Escape hosting the ARRL Orange 2nd Convention. That's at Big Bear Lake, California. April 26th, the Delmarva Amateur Radio and Electronics Expo hosting the ARRL Delaware State Convention in Georgetown, Delaware. April 26th, the Spokane Ham Fest hosting the ARRL Washington State Convention in Spokane Valley, Washington. And on May 4th, the Warmster Amateur Radio Club Annual Ham Fest hosting the ARRL Eastern Pennsylvania Section Convention in Bristol, Pennsylvania. And remember, you can search the ARRL Ham Fest and Convention database to find more events in your area.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
If you're interested in competing in the World Radio Sport Team Championship in the UK in 2026, you have until the 30th of April to submit your sealed bid in U.S. currency. 2 sponsored team positions are available. The 2 highest bidders will be selected for WRTC 2026 after an auction of 2 rounds. The minimum bid is $20,000 US. Sponsored teams have participated in previous WRTC events and differ from qualifying teams in that they purchase their place in the competition. World Radio Sport Team Championship organizers consider this arrangement provides a valuable contribution to the event's budget. All teams are bound by the same operational rules. Bidders will be notified by May 6th as to their standing in the first round and will become eligible to submit their final bid no later than May 31st. For more details about the process, visit WRTC2026.org.
An amateur radio society in New Hampshire has a message for radio amateurs regardless of whether they are technician, general, or extra class. If you want to get on the air more, start by getting online, especially on one particular day next month. On May 10th, the Nashua Area Radio Society is hosting its free ham boot camp on the Zoom platform from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Demonstrations and tutorials will cover emergency communications, satellite operations, FT8, and equipment for VHF and UHF operating. Hams will also learn how to build a station so they can get on the air. In fact, one of the main purposes of the boot camp is to help hams overcome many of the most common obstacles that keep them off the air, everything from how to select the right HT to participating in fox hunting or contesting. For more details, visit November 1 foxtrotdelta.org.
As it marks the completion of its first 100 years, the South African Radio League, or SARL, has set an ambitious goal for itself, one that takes its efforts beyond South Africa. With age comes wisdom, or so it is said, so as it prepares to mark its centenary in May, the South African Radio League has decided that it would be an especially wise move to nurture amateur radio's growth throughout sub-Saharan Africa. SARL President Nico van Rensburg, ZS6QL, told the website Tech Central that amateur radio is almost non-existent outside of Egypt and Nigeria in the northern part of the continent, and Namibia and South Africa in the south. He said, "You have this middle part of Africa where there is nothing, absolutely nothing." Finding a foothold for amateur radio in less developed parts of the continent will be an ambitious agenda, and SARL acknowledges that. This kind of expansion will need political and financial support. SARL's Chris Turner, ZS6GM, who has been active in amateur radio instruction and mentoring, has already had success with efforts in Mozambique. In that nation, ham radio operators are seen as an asset, especially when floods or other natural disasters require emergency communications. SARL has already kicked off its next 100 years with a centenary marathon QSL party that began on the 1st of January and will continue throughout the year through December 31st. Listen for the special event call sign, which will be ZS100 SARL.
Join Salty Walt, K4OGO of the Coastal Waves and Wires YouTube channel, where all the action happens right on the beach. Ham radio adventure awaits with 15 portable antenna designs. Walt begins with the basics of setting up a quarter or halfway vertical, and then draws readers into the more experimental designs like his own Coastal 20 or an end-fed vertical made with Slinky. Each sketch, reproduced from Walt's own design notebook, provides wire lengths and practical attachment information. In addition to the sketches, Walt offers portable construction and operating tips, and just about enough counterpoise wires and ground to get you into making contacts at no time. This isn't a heavy-duty treatise on maximally efficient antennas. It's a book for the true amateur, the ham who gets out by the waves of the radio to see what they can make happen. Like Walt says, this isn't Mozart of antenna books. It's the Jimmy Buffett. Walt pairs each antenna with a dining spot you can try, whether you're on Waimea Bay in Kauai, deep in the Big Easy's French Quarter, or in the long Atlantic stretch of Nag's Head, North Carolina. He guides you to some of the best chowdas, fish tacos, and crab legs, and more while building antennas, making contacts, and soaking up some coastal arrays.
The AMSAT Forum will take place in Forum Room 2 at 1:35 p.m. to 3:10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Saturday, May 17th. This will immediately follow the ARISS Forum in the same room at 12:40 p.m. EDT. And this reminder, the annual AMSAT Dinner at Tickets party will be held at Tickets Pub and Eatery on Thursday, May 15th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. EDT. There is no program or speaker, just good conversation. Everyone is invited regardless of whether or not they helped with setup plan or work the booth. Tickets have a great selection of Greek and American food and great company. Food can be ordered from the menu. Drinks are available at the bar. Come as you are, no reservations required. Bring some friends and have a great time the night before Hamvention. Tickets Pub and Eatery is located at 7 West Main Street, Fairborn, Ohio.
It is time for AMSAT satellite shorts from all over, and we begin this week with SWL operators wishing to enter reception reports on the AMSAT Live Oscar satellite status page can now do so again. After the AMSAT IT team tightened up the security for the Your Call Sign field, SWL identifiers were no longer allowed. At the request of SWLer Christian Meyer, the IT team was able to accept call signs in the format of OE followed by 8 numerical digits. AMSAT looks forward to many observations from the Styrian Mountains in Austria as well as the rest of the world. And we end this week with a report on NASA's Parker Solar Probe. The probe has completed its second daring flyby of the Sun, coming within 3.8 million miles of its surface at speeds nearing 430,000 miles per hour, while collecting valuable data on solar wind and the Sun's corona. The spacecraft operated autonomously during the approach, using 4 specialized instruments to study the Sun's outer atmosphere. This mission marks another historic milestone in solar science, as Parker continues to rewrite what we know about our star and helps scientists better predict space weather. The spacecraft's extreme performance is made possible by cutting-edge technologies, including a heat shield, self-cooling solar arrays, and autonomous systems. In recognition of these innovations, the Parker Solar Probe team, comprising NASA, the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and over 40 partners, was awarded the prestigious 2024 Robert J. Collier Trophy. Launched in 2018 and managed under NASA's Living with a Star program, the probe is expected to make another close approach in June, continuing its groundbreaking journey into uncharted solar territory.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a direct download on our website at www.twiar.net.
Hams in Pennsylvania will be on the riverfront following the progress of canoes for a special charity challenge. The Northbrook Canoe Challenge, taking place on May 3rd on Pennsylvania's Brandywine River, is actually 3 challenges in one. The first challenge is to help support the Cerebral Palsy Association of Chester County. The second is for the boaters to enjoy navigating the at times challenging 9.5 miles of waterway, taking special care around a dam that they encounter midway through the course. The third challenge is the one that will be facing amateur radio operators from the Chester County Aries and Races group to help ensure everyone's safety. The Hams have provided communications for this charitable event for 23 of its 47 years. Like oars guiding the canoes through the challenging waters, the radio operators are guided by a net control station as they check in with real-time reports throughout the 2-hour challenge using a system of 4 linked UHF repeaters with simplex backup. While the Hams pass traffic from the shore, the Chester County Dive Team keeps closer watch from the water itself. Jim Harris, WA3NOA, the Hams technical lead and coordinator, is in touch with the head of the dive team, who communicates with him and the divers using the county's extra rugged handheld P25 radios. Jim told Newsline that it's not over until the final canoe, piloted by someone from the canoe company itself, comes by. Then everyone can be certain that no one has been left behind. He said that canoeing is popular in the county, and on May 3rd, canoeing to raise funds is certain to keep the local Cerebral Palsy Association buoyant too.
The Fram to Ham SST competition was all about the successful reception of a number of different SSTV images that astronauts sent from the SpaceX capsule in early April during the Fram 2 mission. The transmissions were sent over 2 meters puzzle style by astronaut Rabia Rogue, Lima Bravo 9, November, Juliet, Stroke, Kilo Delta 3, Alpha India Delta, as the 3-day mission undertook the first human spaceflight to orbit the planet over the North and South Poles. When pieced together, the images formed a complete picture. First place winner was the team Aristocats, with students in Lithuania, Italy, Switzerland, and here in the U.S., California, and Pennsylvania. Second place was awarded to Team Whiskey 1, Hotel Lima Oscar, Stroke Lima Alpha 1 Kilo, comprising students in Norway, Germany, and here in the U.S., Connecticut, and Pennsylvania. Finally, the third place winner was the team known as Goofy Fram, with students from France, Greece, and here in the U.S., Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and New York. The astronaut said in a statement, "Well done, everyone. We love to see that all the teams were very international. My hope is that some friendships have formed, the passion for technology has been kindled, and that, most of all, everyone had fun."
And finally this week, we take you up to the Great White North, where we find the efforts are reportedly underway to preserve some of the defining infrastructure of modern radio technology. The ARRL reports that the National Trust for Canada has launched a Next Great Save project to restore some of the original radio towers designed and developed by Guglielmo Marconi, who pioneered the creation of radio wave-based telegraphy in the late 1800s. Built in 1904, the Battle Harbor Marconi Towers are reportedly experiencing structural failure after more than a century of exposure to storms and extreme climate conditions on the Labrador coast of Canada, and are in dire need of restoration. The Battle Harbor Marconi Towers were reportedly used to facilitate the transmission of news and announcements from Admiral Robert Peary during his 1909 North Pole expedition. Today, the Marconi Towers are thought to be the last of their kind still standing in North America.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to W2XBS77@gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77@gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard all around the world on the amateur bands, and on great repeater systems like the KB3 CNN Gateway FM Association repeater, on 146.730 MHz every Tuesday evening at 7:30 p.m., covering the wide area of western Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. If your repeater system carries This Week in Amateur Radio, let us know via email, and we will mention your station in an upcoming edition. Send your information to W2XBS77@gmail.com.
Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.